Hi, everyone. Welcome to another Graphic Arts Alliance webinar. Today, we're really happy to be here with Peak Precision. Peak Precision has been, for the last several months, our new logistics vendor who handles our LTL, our FedEx and UPS contracts. So we're really excited to be here with them today. We're here with John Hudson, Mike Blair, and Ellen Riley Wong, who are all going to share some insights about the shipping industry, and then we're going to have an open Q&A session. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to the team, to the Peak Precision team, to get us started. So thank you, John, and everyone for joining us.
Thank you, Wendy. We appreciate it. So my name is John Hudson. I'm the CEO of PeakPrecision Solutions. We are a third party. We manage logistics, and that goes for all modes of logistics. Today, I want to focus specifically on parcel and LTL because what we find in the printing industry, well, especially with the GAA members, the biggest need is parcel. You guys all do parcel. And then also for those of you who do LTL, the larger shipments, we'll get into the LTL. I want to really talk about, when I talk about logistics, it's such a broad topic and we have 45 minutes. So I definitely don't want to be here 4 hours boring you guys with everything that's going on with logistics, but there's a lot going on. And you've seen from the tariffs going on overseas on down to rate increases and capacity issues here in the States and how that affects you guys specifically on both parcel and LTL, because everything's a domino effect. Even though you say, well, I don't do international, I don't worry about tariffs. Everything in logistics is a domino effect. So it kind of all, affects each other. When something happens on international, it affects the domestic and vice versa. So again, I'm going to focus solely on domestic on those two modes, but I just wanted to let you know if you ever have any questions outside of these two modes, please reach out to us. We can help you if it's an international shipment or anything else. So I've been doing logistics for 35 years. I started when I was 5. I'm actually 40 right now, which is, no, kidding, but I wish. So 35 years. And if you go back 35 years ago, domestic logistics, when it comes to parcel and LTL, was very simple. You had UPS ground. Let's talk about parcel. You had UPS for ground, and that was pretty much your only choice. You had FedEx for air, and that was pretty much your only choice. I mean, eventually FedEx bought RPS and became ground, but back in the 80s, they were your only choice. Then you talk about LTL. There were only 4, maybe 5 national LTL carriers in the United States that would go across country. So you only had 4 choices. If you want to go from LA to New York, you had 4 choices, right? Now you have 30. So it's much more complicated now, obviously. And then when you talk about parcel, you have UPS does both ground and air, and FedEx does both ground and air, and they all kind of do everything. And now that's good for competition because obviously now instead of having 4 choices, you have 30 choices, which drives down price for competition. It also adds a level of complexity and makes it more difficult for you to negotiate with the carriers and really understand what's going on or who the right choice is for a particular move. But the carriers have done a really good job, and I'm not going to pick on anyone in particular, I'm going to pick on all of them. They've done a really good job about making their pricing complicated for a reason, because they want to charge you those extra fees or accessorial fees and fuel and this, and you get your bill and you don't know what you're paying. And just to give you an example, on a FedEx contract, there are over 200 negotiable items that you can negotiate in a FedEx contract. I don't know if there's obviously, discounts and different levels of service, but there's 200 plus different things you should really be looking at when you negotiate a contract. So, and for a reason, they don't want you looking at them. You're not going to look at all 200. Some are going to slip through and you're going to get these charges. You're not going to know what they are. LTL is the same way with the accessorial charges. Not quite as bad as 200, but pretty close. So going back, I'm going to say this too. So I hate going back in the past, but I'm going to keep going back in the past because it's going to make sense. So there has not been a new LTL carrier since 1984 to enter the market. Okay. It's just kind of a tidbit of information here, trivia. So the last carrier was called Conway. They don't even exist anymore. Now they're called XPO. But from 1984 till now, no new entrants in the market. So you're dealing with the same players as we had in 1984, right? Now there's been mergers and acquisitions, there's been bankruptcies, there's been partnerships. Carriers have taken on more service areas because they kind of do everything now, or every carrier says they do everything now. You still have some of the regional carriers, but my point is this. So with all these carriers, you're dealing with the same guys, and because for a reason, because you would not, I don't get too far in the weeds here, but it's a very low margin business, transportation, right? For the carriers. So if you had $1 billion, anybody on this call had $1 billion right now, we wouldn't go start an LTL company. That's the last company we'd go start. We go start a software company with huge margin, right? In AI. We wouldn't go buy a 3% margin LTL company. So the guys that are in place do it really well. They're needed because we have to move freight, obviously, until we figure out a way other than trucks to do it. So they're there and they're there for the stay. So they've been doing it a long time, same players. So going back to, so I'm going to separate these both out. So let's talk about parcel first. So parcel has been interesting over the last, what now, 5 years since COVID, right? So 5 years. So parcel has been growing at about 7%, give or take, every year because of e-commerce. Okay. Just every year, adding 7% growth, 7% growth. What happened when COVID hit, and we all remember those days, is we were all trapped in our homes. So what happens? We start ordering more product. So this is a good stat. You guys will like this one. In in December, it was either November or December of 19, so right before COVID, FedEx came out with a prediction. They said by the year 20, at the end of 2026, there will be 100 million parcel shipments total in transit at any given time throughout the world. So think about that. 100 million shipments moving at the same time at any given time, right? COVID hits. They came out in the end of 20 and said, we're going to hit that number in the middle of 21. So think about, you had 5 years of growth, all pushed into basically 1 year. So what happens with that? Well, there's capacity issues, right? It's not like FedEx and UPS can just go out tomorrow and buy 30, if they had a 30% spike in business, they can't go buy 30% more trucks and 30% more planes tomorrow and 30% more employees. So it drives capacity issues. So, and again, it's a domino effect. So what happened was UPS and FedEx came out around that time and said, there's a lot of freight that we really don't like. It's not really profitable. It's too bulky. We're going to push it to the LTL carriers. We don't want to do it anymore. In fact, we're not going to pick it up anymore, Mr. Customer. So, and this probably doesn't affect the printers too much because most of the printing material is pretty dense. But if you had a oversized pallet with a display that you were printing, you're shipping to a customer, that was the kind of freight, or oversized boxes. That was the kind of freight that UPS and FedEx said, we don't want anymore. And they wanted to push it to the LTL carriers. Now that causes another problem. Now the LTL carriers are getting at capacity. Again, that the domino effect. So going back to UPS and FedEx, with the e-commerce, and not to add, I mean, we all have bought something from Amazon, I'm assuming. I mean, Amazon shows up on my door every day, between my kids and my wife. But Jeff Bezos has made the logistics guys' lives miserable. Okay. Everybody expects overnight delivery without paying more money. In fact, half the stuff that gets delivered to my house, my kids order it in the morning and it's here by the afternoon. Okay, that's not reality. It may be reality for Amazon, but that's not reality in our world, business to business logistics. But people think that. In fact, they did a survey where 61% of consumers right now expect overnight delivery and don't want to pay more for it because of Amazon. Okay. So think about that with your customers, is they're demanding better service, quicker service, and they don't want to pay more. Just in a general statement, right? So how do we combat that? Well, we work with the carriers to come up with with the printers and the carriers to come up with a solution to find, maybe it's not just a one carrier solution, maybe it's a multi-carrier solution, or maybe it's going to one carrier and leveraging it and renegotiating the contract and having some of those higher service levels be less expensive so we could accommodate some of those quicker shipments, right? We just are coming out of a switch to LTL. On the LTL side, we're just coming out of call it a minor freight recession. We're in a recession. So what happens in a recession is there's less freight, obviously. So the carriers want to gobble up market share. So what do? They go out and they cut rates and they literally cut their own throats because they're competing with everybody and they're cutting their own rates. And what happens is they try to get as much market share as possible, and then the market turns and we come out of a recession. So what do then? Oh man, I have all this freight that's not profitable because I just took it all at a very low cost. Now I need to start shedding freight. This happened. I don't know if you guys remember. I'm trying to get too far in the weeds on the transportation side, but Yellow Freight, you guys remember Yellow Freight or YRC, the biggest LTL carrier in the world, went bankrupt in 20, about its middle of 23, went bankrupt in 23. So what happened when, I don't know, they probably handled 15, 20% of the freight in the United States, disappeared overnight. What happened? So capacity went crazy. The LTL carriers went to, and FedEx specifically, this made national news. It certainly made the logistics news, but FedEx specifically went out and literally told hundreds, if not thousands, of customers on Friday that they were not going to pick up freight on Monday. Unless some of them, they said, unless we take a 30% increase, one of my customers, and I know this specifically because this is literally one of my customers, we're not going to come pick up your freight unless we can have a 30% increase. And some, they just said, we just don't want your freight anymore. It's not profitable. It doesn't fit our model. We're at capacity. So the reason I'm telling you all this is supply and demand in fluctuations in the market are always going to drive pricing when it comes to the carriers, both on LTL and parcel. So, couple things that are going right now. So the tariffs that are happening right now obviously are affecting domestic transportation. The big thing right now too in domestic transportation is labor shortages. So nobody wants to be a truck driver anymore. There's 100% turnover in the LTL carriers on truck drivers every year. Think about that. If you think about your business, your printing business, what if 100% of your employees were replaced every single year? Think about training new employees, hiring, and all that work and effort in recruiting, right? At 100% turnover. So it causes a lot of chaos and turmoil in the marketplace when you have that kind of turnover. So that's really big right now. Um, with all of the AI technology coming, it's going to revolutionize logistics, by the way. I'm sure it's going to revolutionize a lot of industries, but with logistics, that's very labor intensive. And it's kind of been doing it the same way for 25, 30 years. AI is going to revolutionize it. So that is a big driver right now because people are going to expect real-time tracking, right? Which, UPS and FedEx offer it, but some of these smaller carriers don't offer it. If they don't offer it, it's not going to be a luxury anymore for the bigger guys. It's going to be a necessity for everybody to offer. So everybody's scrambling right now to make sure they get their systems up in place, which again is going to drive costs and inefficiencies and growing pains that may affect pricing on both the LTL, maybe not so much on the parcel side, you're probably protecting the parcel, but definitely on the LTL. Um, so let's talk about increases. This is a big one. So I believe in 2025, and Mike, you can keep me honest here, UPS, FedEx, to DHL all took about a 5.96% increase, somewhere around there. Yeah, okay, I see you nodding.
Yep,
Think
that's
about
accurate.
that every year. It's always right around 6%-ish, give or take, either way. So think about that, guys. When you have a contract and it goes up 6% this year, well, next year that's compounding. It's going up another 6% and another 6% and another 6%. And that number is compounding. It's not just 6%, it's 6% of the new higher number compounding. So when you get out 10 years, your rate theoretically, your base rate without your discount could theoretically be double what it was 10 years ago. Not to mention that 43% of your cost, and this is just a general statement, not yours specifically, 43% of the cost on parcel is accessorials. So when you go and you start negotiating a contract with UPS and or FedEx, and you are really working hard on driving that, cost down. I want that better discount. I want that better discount. I want that better discount. And you're not paying attention to the accessorials, you're really only affecting 57% of your spend. that other 43%, right, of accessorials, if you're not looking at that and really trying to drive that cost down, you're not going to effectively get to where you need to be competitive in the market where you should be on both. And this goes for both UPS and FedEx, same animal. All right. LTL. So LTL was not quite 6% across the board. I think it ranged from 8%, some of the carriers on the higher end, down to 3%. But again, still a big number, compounding year over year over year. You start talking about fuel and fluctuations and all the accessorials that go along with LTL, not quite as dramatic as parcel, but still, again, a big number, probably 30%. So when you start, and I'm not even talking about fuel, with fuel, it's probably more like 40%. So when you talk about negotiating with your LTL carriers and you're still focused on that discount, and they're just tacking on these $150 residential fees and liftgate charges and all these things that are all negotiable, but you haven't taken the time to really understand how to negotiate those, you're leaving a lot of money on the table and you're not getting the most competitive rate. So what's happening right now, and literally just happened last week, not even a week ago, on the 19th of this month. It was the biggest change in LTL in my 35 years of in logistics. So what they did was, and I promise I won't get too far in the weeds here, but what they did was, you guys all know what freight class is, I'm assuming. So when you ship something, it has a freight class. The NMFC book, National Motor Freight Classification book, is about that thick. I wouldn't suggest reading it, it's very boring. And it is every item that could possibly ship in the United States, or actually worldwide, but specifically here for the US, that has a what they call an NMFC number, which drives it to a freight class. What a freight class is it ranges from class 50 on up to class 400. And basically, what it is identifies the density of that product. And I'll give you a quick example. If carriers, you got to remember the LTO carriers are selling space on their truck. That's all they care about is space. They don't care about weight as long as it doesn't exceed the maximum weight. They just care about the space. They want to maximize that truck, right? So if you had a box or a pallet of lead weight, I'm just going to give two extreme examples. Let's call it printed, really dense printed material, brochures, right? That pallet that's 48 by 40 by 50 high might weigh 2,000 pounds, right? So very dense. The denser the product, the lower the freight class. So that may move at class, call it 65, which means the cost per pound to move that is significantly cheaper than a higher class product. Now, let me go to the extreme in the printing world. You do a bunch of bubble printing on bubble wrap, envelopes, very fluffy, not dense, right? That pallet may only weigh 600 pounds, but it takes up the same space in the truck, right, as that 2,000-pound pallet. So that if the carrier's billing you by the weight, why would they ever want to move bubble wrap when they can move brochures all day long? I want to bill you 2,000 pounds. I don't want to bill you 600. So what class does is it makes it an even playing field. The higher the class, the higher the cost per pound. The lower the class, the lower the cost per pound. So that same space on the LTL truck, they get the same revenue. Hopefully that made sense. Okay, so what they've changed now is they don't care what you're shipping anymore. They don't care if it's printed material, iPhones, keys, a wallet. I'm just looking at my desk. It could be anything, right? So they just care about density. So now they don't care that, hey, these bubble wrap things are NMFC 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, class 125. They just want to know the density. What does the pallet weigh? What are the dimensions? And they're going to base their pricing on density rather than product. And I'll tell you why. Because think about this. Here's my cell phone, right? Let's say I was shipping a pallet of cell phones, and it was stacked perfectly with a bunch of cell phones, just really dense. And I said, oh, and they said, well, cell phones are class 60. Great. What if I packaged those cell phones and I wrapped each cell phone in bubble wrap and only got 10 in a box instead of 30? Well, it's still cell phones. It's still class 60 carrier. I mean, what do you mean you're going to charge me more? Well, they said, yeah, it's class 60, but the way you're packaging it, we're shipping a bunch of air. So that same, again, going back to that original example, it should weigh 2,000 pounds, not weigh 600 pounds. We don't care if cell phones are in there or anything's in there. We're going to charge you the density. It's a big change. Again, the biggest change I've seen in 35 years by far, like 2 or 3 times more extreme than the last change that NMFC made. And it's affecting a lot of people, some for the better, some for the worse. So keep an eye on that with your LTL carriers right now with pricing, because if they haven't told you, if their sales guy is a good salesperson, they should have come and told you that this is happening. If they haven't, it is happening, and it's happening with all the carriers. In fact, it happened on the 19th. So you may start getting bills that are more, maybe less, which is great, but more than you were paying before and not know why. That's why. Because they've taken a look at your product and said, yeah, I don't care if it's NMFC this for bubble wrap stuff. It's too fluffy and we're going to ding you for it. Okay. It's a big thing. That's a big thing. So hence, so you must ask, well, how do I get around all this stuff with whether it's UPS with all the accessorials or LTL with all the accessorials and all the changes? The best way is to really understand what's going on and talk to your sales rep. But obviously, working with a 3PL, whether it's Peak Precision Solutions or another 3PL, you could really have the expertise of the 3PL, because we know this is what we do for a living. We know this like the back of our hand. Whether it's helping you renegotiate your parcel contract with the UPS or FedEx and making sure all those items are negotiated and you're getting best in class pricing on everything, not just the discount. And then flip to the LTL side, same thing for the LTL side, getting best in class pricing on all the accessorials, but also making sure that if things like what I just explained, the NMFC change is going to affect you, how do we mitigate any potential, expense that you are going to incur? Do we switch carriers? Do we figure out another way to package it? Do we um, think of a better way to ship it? It could be a different mode of transportation, maybe consolidating shipments and moving it partial truckload versus LTL. So there's a lot of ways to skin the cat. I think, working with an expert that really understands freight is how you're going to stay ahead of the curve on both parcel and LTL. So I've dumped a lot of data on you guys. I apologize. So what I really would like to do is open it up for specific questions, because I'm sure you have a couple specific questions. And then after, if we exhaust all those questions, I have a couple more points I want to close out with. Is that okay, Wendy?
That's beautiful. Thank you. That was really very informative. And I'm going to put it out to our members that are on the call today. If you have any questions, feel free to just unmute and ask it. While you are thinking of questions, I actually had a question. John, you had mentioned that one of our members, you were able to help them before they signed the contract. You were able to help them get almost potentially 20% in savings,
Yep.
which is amazing. I'm actually curious what it was that they they missed, or like what is the common thing that a lot of your customers are missing. And maybe Mike, I'll put you on the spotlight here a little bit too, because I
Yep.
know you're part of the renegotiation aspect of it. But I'm curious what people are commonly missing on these contracts is causing them to pay more.
Yeah, I'll tell you high level, and I think Mike could probably get into a little more detail if you would like more detail. But on a high level, it's exactly what I just explained. There are over 200 negotiable items on a contract, and I don't expect the average person or printer or anybody for that matter to understand that unless you've been doing it for 35 years. Mike, the advantage we have with Mike is not only has he been in logistics for 35 years, he's specifically been in parcel logistics for 35 years. Prior to working with, he and I have worked together for over 20 years, but prior to us working together, he was actually with UPS for 16 years, 15 years, Mike. Yep. So, I mean, he knows what they covet, what they'll bend on, what they won't bend on. So having that knowledge when negotiating, I mean, knowledge, right? This goes for anything, doesn't have to be freight. If you have the knowledge of what the supplier really wants and doesn't want, and where they'll bend and where they won't bend, that is gold when you're negotiating. So, Wendy, you're specifically what it was for this particular GAA member. It was helping with the discounts, which they were not at market rates where they should have been, but more importantly, really driving down all those accessorials that I talked about that represent 43% of their spend. And
Wow.
overall,
Yeah.
I say 20%. We don't have the final numbers back from UPS. I say 20%. My guess is it may be a little more. Our average right now on somebody spending, let's call it 3 million or less in parcel a year, we're averaging between 26 and 27% savings.
Wow, that's
And that's
incredible.
probably most of the GAA members. Obviously, you have big GAA members who may have multiple millions of dollars in parcel. Again, we can help. Mike has negotiated, I think our biggest contract was 650 million, right? Yeah, that's
Right.
obviously extreme. Most of them are under 10, 10, 15 million or lower. But I would say the bulk of them are, even more of them are, under 3 million. But again, if you start getting up to 3, 4, $5 million, there's savings in there. It may not be 26%, but even 15% off of, $5 million is a big number, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
When
I
you're already
think
paying
so.
it. And remember that those numbers, when you're talking about freight expense and you're already paying that expense, when you recoup that expense, that goes straight to the bottom line. So that is real. I mean, if you want to talk EBITDA, that is EBITDA, pure EBITDA,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, great. Thank you. That's really good to know. And Mike, I don't know, since I know you've worked on some of these too, I'm curious. So it sounds like the biggest thing is that just the lack of knowledge, the accessorials is a big one that a lot of companies are just not knowing how to navigate.
Yeah, it's the total. It really is, Wendy, the total mix, and for everybody here and whoever may hear this, ultimately, it's the total mix of what is the economy doing right now? Where is it headed? Is it up? Is it down? Where is your business? Is it up? Is it down? What are the carriers, to John's point, what are they coveting? What do they really want in their network? What are they trying to avoid, right? So helping navigate kind of all of those constantly moving and shifting waters is really what we do, because we solely focus on the logistics side, the LTL and parcel specifically, for the context of the call here. But it's really that, just having that experience. To check, any shipper, and like John said, under 3 million is a very common number. To check where they're at first, and then compare it against, right? Compare it against what's the competitive landscape, what's the economy doing. So it's just that total blend, and then helping navigate the actual conversation and helping that customer translate our knowledge into their benefit, right? And lowering spend.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. I just dropped, so Peak Precision actually created a landing page for Graphic Arts Alliance members. If you are wanting to just kind of do more one-off pricing to see what individual shipping jobs would cost, you can use that landing page to do some pricing on LTL and on on parcel. But I also put in here John's information if you wanted to reach out to him directly, and he can kind of put you in touch with Mike if that's the direction you need to go. Are there any questions? Anyone here that has any questions about the programs or about shipping at this point? So I think you guys did a really great job of kind of giving us a solid overview. And I want to tell those of you, and for those of you who are going to be watching the replay, that Peak Precision signed on with Graphic Arts Alliance as our preferred LTL and parcel shipping vendor earlier this year. And we've been very pleased. They've worked with a few of our members now and be able to get them some savings on their shipping. So I highly, highly encourage you to reach out to them. Just give John a call, email him, and he can direct you accordingly. But just check it out. We all know that shipping can be a pretty significant cost item with printing, especially if you do have a lot of shipping out of your jobs and not doing pickups. And so this is a really important contract to explore as a Graphic Arts Alliance member. So please do take advantage of their expertise and their pricing, because I think you'll really be able to appreciate either the one-off pricing through the portal that they've provided, or us, and also Mike and John's expertise as well with just negotiating those contracts. So if there's not any other questions, I wanted to thank both of you for coming today. I know it's the summer, but we appreciate you taking the time and speaking with us about some of the trends that have been going on in the industry. So For all of those of you, I'm going to be putting this up on our YouTube channel in the next few days. We'll get that replay out to all of you as well in the next few days to be able to learn all the information. So thank you, John. Thank you, Mike. And I'm going to just give a thank you to Ellen as well for joining on. So Ellen, just so we can see you for a minute there, a little highlight. Everyone have a wonderful rest of your summer. Thank you again, and we'll all stay in close touch.
Thank you.
Thanks, Wendy.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.